So here's what just happened. The President of the United States just kicked Canada off his new global peace board, and it gets worse. He also claimed that NATO troops, including hundreds who died in Afghanistan, basically sat on the sidelines during a 20-year war. I'm looking at this right now, and I need to walk you through why this isn't just a diplomatic spat. This is something else entirely. Let me show you where this all started blowing up. 2 days ago, Trump is in Davos, Switzerland. He's there for the World Economic Forum, and he launches something called the Board of Peace. Now, this thing was supposed to oversee Gaza reconstruction after the ceasefire. But Trump had bigger plans. He wanted it to rival the United Nations. Countries could pay $1 billion for a permanent seat. Canada said they joined in principle, but they weren't paying the billion. Here's where it gets complicated. The same day Trump launches this board, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney gives a speech, and Carney doesn't hold back. He's talking about how middle powers need to stand up against economic coercion from superpowers. He's talking about the collapse of the rules-based international order. He specifically supports Greenland and Denmark's right to determine their own future. Trump is watching this speech. And what I'm about to show you changes the whole picture. Trump gets on stage at Davos and says this: "We're building a golden dome that's going to, just by its very nature, be defending Canada. Canada gets a lot of freebies from us. They should be grateful, but they're not. I watched your prime minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. Canada lives because of the United States." Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements? Now, what is this golden dome he's talking about? It's a multi-billion-dollar missile defense system. Reports are coming in that it could cost anywhere from $161 billion to $542 billion over 20 years. The system would use satellites and space-based interceptors to shoot down missiles from Russia, China, or North Korea before they hit North American targets. And here's what nobody's talking about. Trump says he needs Greenland to make this work. The Arctic location is critical because that's the flight path for intercontinental ballistic missiles. Documents reveal that the Pentagon already operates Pufik Space Base in Greenland, formerly called Thule Air Base. It's one of the northernmost early warning radar stations on Earth. But that's not even the real story, because within hours of Trump's DVO speech, he posts on Truth Social, and he withdraws Canada's invitation to the Board of Peace. Just like that, the letter is public. It says, "Please let this letter serve to represent that the Board of Peace is withdrawing its invitation to you regarding Canada's joining what will be the most prestigious board of leaders ever assembled at any time." Wait, it gets worse, because now we have to talk about what else Trump said in Davos. He gives an interview and he says something that's causing absolute chaos right now. He's asked about NATO and he says, "We've never needed them." We have never really asked anything of them. They'll say they sent some troops to Afghanistan, and they did. They stayed a little back, a little off the front lines. I had to read that 3 times when I first saw it, because what we're learning is that 457 British troops died in Afghanistan. Over 150 Canadians were killed. 90 French soldiers, 44 Danish soldiers. And these weren't support roles. British and Canadian forces were stationed in Helmand and Kandahar, which were the most dangerous provinces in Afghanistan, the Taliban heartland. This is the part that kept me up last night, because the only time in NATO's history that Article 5 has been invoked was after September 11th, 2001. Article 5 says an attack on one member is an attack on all. Every NATO country answered that call. They sent their troops to fight alongside American forces in Afghanistan. And now the president is saying they stayed off the front lines. The reaction to Trump's Afghanistan comments is unlike anything I've seen in transatlantic relations. And then this happened. Prince Harry releases a statement, and remember, Prince Harry served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He was there in 2008 and 2012. He says, in 2001, NATO invoked Article 5 for the first and only time in history. It meant that every allied nation was obliged to stand with the United States in Afghanistan in pursuit of our shared security. I served there, I made lifelong friends there, and I lost friends there. The United Kingdom alone had 457 service personnel killed. Thousands of lives were changed forever. But here's where it gets even more intense. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer calls Trump's remarks insulting and frankly appalling. He's on camera saying Trump should apologize. The UK's defense secretary says British troops answered the U.S. call, and those who died should be remembered as heroes who gave their lives in service of their nation. Sources are now confirming that veterans across Europe are absolutely furious. There's a woman named Diane Durney. Her son, Ben Parkinson, was severely injured when his Land Rover hit a mine in Afghanistan in 2006. She calls Trump's comments the ultimate insult. She's saying this on national television. Now, what I'm about to show you is where this gets really complicated for U.S.-Canada relations, because it's not just about hurt feelings or historical revisionism. This is about what's happening right now with Arctic defense. The Canadian ambassador to the United States, Kirsten Hillman, gives an interview, and she's asked about Trump's claim that Canada is against his Golden Dome deployment. She says Canada is investing over $80 billion in defense over the next 5 years. A big part of that is Arctic defense, specifically something called over-the-horizon radar. Here's what nobody's talking about. Canada's geography makes it essential for any North American missile defense. If Russia or China launches missiles at the United States, the fastest route is over Canadian Arctic territory. The latest information shows that Canada already works with the U.S. through NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command. They share radar data, coordinate air defense, integrate their systems. But that's not even the full picture, because Trump posts another message saying Canada is against the Golden Dome being built over Greenland. Even though it would protect Canada, he's claiming they voted to do business with China instead. Wait, it gets worse. Because what we're seeing here is a complete breakdown in how allies communicate. Reports are coming in that multiple European countries have declined to join Trump's Board of Peace. The UK Foreign Secretary says they won't be signatories, citing concerns about Russian President Putin being invited to join the board. And then there's the money aspect. The Board of Peace requires a $1 billion payment for permanent membership. Canadian Finance Minister Francis Philip Champagne says flat out, Canada is not going to pay if we were to join the Board of Peace. They'll participate, but they're not writing a $1 billion check. This is the part that changes everything, because what we're watching is the U.S. trying to reorganize global security architecture while simultaneously insulting the sacrifices of its closest allies. Documents reveal that other key allies like Britain, France, and Germany have also declined the Board of Peace invitation. Here's what keeps getting overlooked. NATO isn't just a military alliance on paper. It's integrated defense systems, it's shared intelligence, it's joint operations that happen every single day. The Canadian military trains with American forces, they share bases, they coordinate Arctic patrols, and all of that is now under a massive question mark. But wait, there's more, because Trump's administration is defending his comments. The White House spokesperson puts out a statement. It says President Trump is right. America's contributions to NATO dwarf that of other countries. His success in delivering a 5% spending pledge from NATO allies is helping Europe take greater responsibility for its own defense. The United States is the only NATO partner who can protect Greenland, and the president is advancing NATO interests in doing so. Now, we need to talk about what this Golden Dome actually is and why Greenland matters so much, because this is where the geopolitics gets absolutely wild. The Golden Dome is supposed to be a multi-layered missile defense system. Officials are now saying it would use satellites equipped with sensors and space-based interceptors. Think of it like Israel's Iron Dome, but for an entire continent. The system would detect and destroy ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, and cruise missiles at multiple stages from launch to impact. Here's where it gets complicated. The Congressional Budget Office looked at this, and their estimate is staggering. Between $161 billion and $542 billion over 20 years, Congress has already pledged $25 billion to it, but Trump called that just a down payment. And then there's Greenland. Trump has been pushing hard to acquire control of Greenland from Denmark. He says it's vital for the Golden Dome. And when you look at a map, you start to understand why Greenland sits right under the flight paths that Russian and Chinese missiles would take to hit targets in the United States. But here's what nobody's talking about. The Pentagon already operates Pufik Space Base in Greenland. It's above the Arctic Circle, roughly halfway between Washington and Moscow. The base has an advanced radar system that can detect missile launches from Russia and track potential Chinese missile paths. Sources are now confirming that this radar gives the U.S. early warning time. Pavle Podvig, an analyst who specializes in Russia's nuclear arsenal, says Greenland's location gives the United States more time to think about what to do when a threat is detected. That reaction time could be the difference between interception and catastrophe. This is the part that kept me up last night because French nuclear defense specialist Etienne Marousse points out something crucial. Trump has never spoken about needing to take control of the United Kingdom, even though the UK also plays an important role in U.S. missile defense. There's an early warning radar at Fylingdales in northern England that serves both governments. So why the obsession with Greenland specifically? Wait, it gets worse, because what we're learning is that Trump imposed 10% tariffs on 8 NATO nations that opposed U.S. control of Greenland. He's using economic weapons against allies. Then he backs off after a meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, saying they form the framework for a deal on Arctic security. But that's not even the real story. Documents reveal that Trump is privately complaining to his assistants about Canada's vulnerability to Washington's opponents in the Arctic. The latest information shows he's concerned that Canada can't defend its Arctic territory from Russia and China. Here's what changes the whole picture. Canada shares a massive border with the United States. They're one of America's largest trading partners. They have integrated defense through NORAD. And now the president is publicly questioning whether they're capable of defending their own territory. And then this happened. Trump posts that Canada is voting to do business with China, who will eat them up within the first year. He's referring to Prime Minister Carney announcing a new strategic partnership with China during a trip to Beijing last week. Now, what I'm about to show you is where this becomes a crisis, because the Canadian government has to balance multiple pressures. They need to maintain their relationship with the United States for security and trade, but they also can't be seen as surrendering sovereignty or being bullied into spending billions on American defense projects. Reports are coming in that Canada is already investing massively in Arctic defense, $80 billion over 5 years. They're building over the horizon radar systems, buying submarines, getting new aircraft. The Canadian ambassador says these investments will work with American systems to maximize benefits for both countries. But here's where it gets really complicated. The Golden Dome would essentially create a defensive umbrella over North America. Canada would benefit from it whether they pay for it or not because of geography. So Trump is essentially saying Canada should be grateful and pay their share for a system that primarily defends American assets. Let me show you why this matters more than just diplomatic theater. Because what we're watching is a fundamental shift in how alliances work. The United States and Canada have one of the longest peaceful borders in the world. They've had integrated defense since the Cold War through NORAD. Canadian soldiers fought and died alongside Americans in Afghanistan, Korea, and World War II. This isn't a transactional relationship. It's built on shared values, shared sacrifice, and shared security interests. But here's what nobody's talking about. Trump's approach treats alliances like business deals. Countries either pay up or they're not valuable partners. The problem is that defense relationships aren't just about money. They're about trust, coordination, shared intelligence, and political support. Sources are now confirming that other NATO allies are watching this Canada situation very closely. If the U.S. can kick Canada off a peace board and publicly insult their military sacrifices, what does that mean for European NATO members? What does it mean for Japan or South Korea? This is the part that changes everything, because The Golden Dome might be technologically impressive, but it requires cooperation from allies. The radar systems, the satellite networks, the command and control infrastructure all depend on bases and partnerships around the world. And then there's the cost. Documents reveal that even the low-end estimate of $161 billion would make this one of the most expensive defense projects in American history. Some analysts are saying the space-based interceptor concept is similar to Reagan's Star Wars program from the 1980s, which never fully materialized. Wait, it gets worse because critics are pointing out fundamental flaws. The system would need thousands of space-based interceptors distributed around Earth. These interceptors have to maintain rapid orbits to avoid falling back to Earth. But that rapid motion means only a small fraction would be available at the right time and place to intercept any given threat. What we're learning is that the Government Accountability Office warned in early 2025 that the satellite constellation for Golden Dome faces significant technical challenges. The Space Development Agency is building these satellites, but questions remain about whether the technology is actually ready. But that's not even the full picture. The latest information shows that Russia and China are watching all of this very closely. They're developing their own hypersonic weapons specifically designed to defeat missile defense systems. It's an arms race, and there's no guarantee the Golden Dome would actually work against these next-generation threats. Here's where it gets absolutely wild. Some analysts are saying that Trump's real goal isn't just missile defense. It's about reshaping the global security order with the United States at the center, making decisions and allocating costs to allies. The Board of Peace would replace or rival the United Nations. The Golden Dome would make other countries dependent on American defensive technology. Now, what I'm about to show you is where this leads, because Canada is facing a choice. Do they cave to pressure and pay for American defense systems? Do they push back and risk the relationship? Or do they try to balance by maintaining ties with both the U.S. and other partners like China? Reports are coming in that this is happening at the worst possible time. The U.S.-Canada Free Trade Agreement needs renewal. There are ongoing disputes about tariffs, and now there's this massive question about whether the fundamental alliance still works. The Canadian ambassador says Canada is deeply committed to Arctic defense. They're making unprecedented investments. They're working with NATO allies, including the Nordic-Baltic 8, to secure the alliance's northern and western flanks. They're putting boots on the ice, as she says. But Trump is sending a very different message. He's saying Canada lives because of the United States. He's saying they should be grateful. He's withdrawing peace board invitations and questioning their commitment as an ally. And here's the thing that gets me. This isn't happening in isolation. Trump is simultaneously pushing to acquire Greenland, threatening tariffs on Denmark, questioning whether NATO would defend the U.S. if needed, and claiming allied troops didn't fight on the front lines in Afghanistan. Here's what concerns me more than anything else in this situation. The people who actually fought in Afghanistan, the men and women who stood shoulder to shoulder in some of the most dangerous places on earth, and the families who buried their children, their sons and daughters, in the dust and heat of that conflict. These are not abstract statistics or historical footnotes. These are real people who faced life and death situations, who endured unspeakable trauma, who came home forever changed, and in far too many cases, never came home at all. And now, as we watch the current American president publicly dismiss the scale and significance of their sacrifice, it isn't just a political controversy, it's a profound moral affront. British veterans have spoken out, calling the remarks outrageous, insisting that the bravery, courage, and lives lost by their comrades cannot be trivialized. Polish officials have emphasized that the service and sacrifice of their soldiers in Afghanistan will never be forgotten and should never be diminished, highlighting that the bonds forged in combat are foundational to the trust and cooperation that alliances like NATO depend upon. Danish politicians have described the comments as ignorant, underscoring that these are not mere words. They strike at the very heart of the relationships built on shared defense, shared risk, and shared responsibility. Alliances are not built solely on treaties, legal agreements, or budgets. They are built on trust, on mutual respect, and on the recognition that in times of crisis, each country will stand with its partners, sometimes at the ultimate cost. When a leader publicly claims that soldiers who fought and died on the front lines stayed back or didn't really engage, it does more than misstate history. It threatens the very foundation of those alliances. It calls into question the reliability of one partner, sows doubt among others, and risks eroding decades of cooperative security structures painstakingly built since World War II. The consequences are not theoretical. Every NATO mission, every joint exercise, every intelligence sharing initiative relies on the assumption that the sacrifices of the past are acknowledged and that allies can count on each other when the next crisis inevitably arrives. What makes this even more alarming is the context in which it happens. The world is facing unprecedented security threats on multiple fronts. Russia's war in Ukraine continues unabated, destabilizing Europe and challenging the assumptions that underpin transatlantic security. China is expanding its military capabilities at an unprecedented rate, asserting itself in the Indo-Pacific and testing the limits of international norms. North Korea continues to advance its nuclear weapons programs, demonstrating new missile capabilities, while Iran develops increasingly sophisticated regional and strategic threats. These are not distant challenges. They are immediate, and they require a coordinated response from the United States, Europe, and other allied nations. Yet, instead of reinforcing cohesion, instead of doubling down on shared intelligence, joint exercises, and strategic alignment, the United States is publicly at odds with Canada and is insulting European NATO members, undermining trust at precisely the moment it is most needed. So now we are left with a critical question: where does this go from here? Does Canada feel pressured to acquiesce to American demands, potentially compromising its sovereignty or redirecting massive defense resources to align with U.S.-led projects like the so-called Golden Dome? Will the president back down in the face of international outrage, or is this the start of a deeper, more fundamental realignment of North American and global defense priorities that could reverberate for decades? The stakes could not be higher. We are talking about the very future of NATO, the integrity of Arctic security, and the framework through which democracies collaborate to deter and confront authoritarian threats. We are talking about whether trust, mutual respect, and shared sacrifice, the glue that has held alliances together through generations of crises, can survive a political moment that seems determined to treat partnerships as transactional and allies as negotiable commodities. And right now, with the rhetoric, the withdrawals, and the escalating tensions, the outcome is anything but certain. I want to know what you think. Does this change how you view the United States-Canada relationship? Does it make you question the reliability of NATO or the way international security agreements are maintained? Or do you see this as a temporary flare-up in a long-standing alliance? Are there dimensions I'm missing that could shift this entire story? Let me know in the comments below, because the truth is, this isn't just about politics. It's about real people, real sacrifices, and the real future of global security.